Today, you're about to witness a side of Mike Tyson the world rarely sees. A man who once let rage define him is now faced with a challenge that could awaken the beast inside, or show the world that true strength lies in control. In a city buzzing with anticipation, a young fighter dares to provoke a legend. The crowd expects a fight, a fury, a knockout, but Tyson has a different plan. His silence speaks louder than any punch, and every move he makes will leave you holding your breath. Watch closely. History is about to rewrite itself. Welcome to the channel. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Today, we dive into a story of power, control, and legacy, where Mike Tyson faces a challenge that tests more than his fists. The suspense starts now. The gym was quiet, save for the rhythmic thud of gloves against heavy bags and the distant hum of early morning traffic outside. Dawn had barely broken, and a pale light filtered through the high windows, casting long, sharp shadows across the worn wooden floor. The scent of leather and sweat hung in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of old linoleum and polished metal. Here, in this sanctuary of discipline and solitude, Mike Tyson moved with a precision that only years of experience could grant. A predator softened by reflection, yet still unmistakably a force of nature. He wrapped his hands slowly, deliberately, each layer of tape a ritual. His muscles tensed as his mind wandered briefly to the past. The roaring crowds, the flashes of cameras, the fury that had once defined him. Those memories were never far from his mind. He remembered nights in packed arenas when the world watched him fight, a man both feared and revered. But today was different. The fire still burned, but it no longer controlled him. The fire could wait. A knock at the gym door startled him, breaking the rhythm of the morning. Tyson paused, looking toward the small entrance where a young man in a hoodie hesitated. He looked familiar, a reporter, maybe, or a fan seeking an autograph. "Morning," the young man said, his voice nervous but bold. "You don't know me, but there's a fight. People are talking. They say a young guy wants to take your legacy. He's challenging you, out in the open. Public. Media frenzy. It's a big deal." Tyson's eyes narrowed, piercing the dim light. He leaned against the heavy bag, listening carefully. The young man continued, oblivious to the silent storm in Tyson's gaze. "He's cocky. He's arrogant. Says he can take the old champ. Says you're washed up. The city's buzzing. Everyone's waiting to see if you'll strike back." For a moment, Tyson said nothing. His hands, still wrapped, rested on the bag, feeling its familiar weight. Anger, old familiar anger, stirred briefly, a flicker of the beast that had once made him unstoppable. But he did not rise to it. Instead, he closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, letting the sound of the city seep in through the cracked windows. He remembered every punch thrown in anger, every fight won, but also every consequence left behind. Rage could destroy, yes, but restraint could speak volumes. He could fight with his fists, but today he wanted the world to see him fight with his mind, his experience, his spirit. The young man shuffled nervously. "So, what will you do?" Tyson's voice was calm, low, almost a growl restrained. "I'll watch. I'll move. I'll show him, without hitting first." The young man blinked, uncertain. "Without hitting?" Tyson smiled faintly, a ghost of the old grin that had once unnerved opponents before the bell. "Sometimes," he said, "the loudest punches aren't thrown." The day passed slowly. Tyson trained methodically, shadowboxing with a rhythm that mirrored the pulse of his thoughts. Each movement was deliberate, controlled, calculated, an art form. He danced around invisible opponents, ducked under jabs that weren't there, and struck with precision that only decades in the ring could hone. Sweat poured, muscles screamed, yet his mind remained calm, focused. Outside, the city buzzed with rumors. Social media exploded with the story of a young fighter daring to challenge the former world champion. The posts were aggressive, mocking, baiting Tyson to respond with the fury everyone expected. But Tyson remained silent. He did not post, he did not speak. Instead, he prepared, not just his body, but his mind. That evening, the gym emptied save for him. He walked slowly to the mirror, removing his gloves and staring at his reflection. The face looking back at him was older, scarred, wise. Eyes that had seen triumph and tragedy alike studied him intently. He saw the shadow of the fighter he once was, the one who let anger dictate his life, But he also saw something new, a man who understood power, not just in the ring, but in restraint. A soft breeze drifted through the open window, lifting the edges of his training shorts. He flexed his fingers, feeling the familiar ache of worn knuckles, the memory of countless battles embedded in his skin. His reflection seemed almost alive, a ghost of the past conversing silently with the present. Tyson understood the challenge ahead wasn't just physical. It was personal, philosophical. The young fighter outside wanted a fight for fame, for ego. Tyson wanted something far more profound, a lesson in power, control, and respect. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. A video clip. The young fighter in the public square, mocking Tyson, gesturing for a fight, the crowd cheering him on. The young man's words were sharp, mocking, aimed directly at Tyson's legacy. The crowd in the clip roared. Social media exploded. The world was watching. Tyson's jaw tightened, but still he said nothing. Instead, he walked to the ring at the center of the gym, climbing in slowly. He adjusted the ropes, feeling their worn leather, and stared at the empty space as if it were filled with spectators, cameras, and the very energy of challenge itself. He shadowboxed, each movement a conversation with the space around him. His body spoke fluently in the language of discipline, experience, and intuition. Every jab, every weave, every duck told a story of battles fought, lessons learned, and a wisdom born from fire and fury. By nightfall, Tyson sat alone on the gym floor, gloves off, sweat drying on his skin, muscles trembling slightly. He stared at the ceiling, deep in thought. This wasn't just about defending his reputation. It was about proving something more significant. That legacy is not in the roar of the crowd or the flash of cameras, but in the quiet moments where choices define a man. And as he stood, stretching and preparing to leave, a thought lingered in his mind. The world expects a fight. They want the beast. But what if I show them the man instead? What if silence can hit harder than any punch? Outside, the city lights flickered on as night settled over the streets. Somewhere out there, the young fighter was preparing, confident, brash, unaware of the storm of experience waiting silently. Tyson walked to the door, paused, and looked back at the gym, the shadows of the ring stretching behind him. Tomorrow, the challenge would arrive, but tonight, he had already made his choice. He stepped into the quiet streets, the weight of history on his shoulders, and the dawn waiting for him on the horizon. The fight was coming, but Tyson was no longer the man the world thought he was. And that was exactly the point. The city was buzzing. Bright lights, towering billboards, and the echo of media vans created a backdrop that felt more like a battlefield than a simple square. The young fighter had orchestrated a spectacle, a public challenge to Mike Tyson, meant to bait the legend into a display of rage. Crowds gathered, phones raised, ready to record every anticipated punch. Cameras swiveled, flashes illuminated the evening, and the energy was electric. Everyone expected violence. Everyone expected the beast. Tyson arrived quietly. No entourage, no grand entrance, just the measured steps of a man who had faced far more than any street-level brashness could muster. He walked past the crowd, and whispers rippled through them. Is it really him? Some held their breath, others cheered, and a few scoffed. The young fighter's voice pierced the air, loud, cocky, full of bravado. There he is, the legend himself. Come on, old man, show us what you've got. Tyson's eyes met the young fighter's for the first time. In those eyes, the crowd expected fire. Fury, unleashed chaos. But what they saw instead was calm. Precision. Control. Tyson stepped into the small makeshift ring set up for the demonstration, moving slowly, deliberately. His posture was relaxed, yet every muscle betrayed readiness. This was not a man unprepared. The young fighter circled him, taunting, bouncing lightly on his heels. He lunged suddenly, a classic move meant to provoke, to test Tyson's reflexes. The crowd gasped, expecting a flinch, a counterstrike, but Tyson simply stepped aside. His movement was fluid, effortless, like water flowing around an obstacle. Not a punch thrown, not a word spoken. Whispers spread through the audience. Is he not fighting? The young fighter's smirk faltered slightly. He tried again, faster this time, jabbing and feinting, attempting to corner the legend. Tyson mirrored each movement with uncanny timing, slipping under punches, weaving around strikes, his body a living testament to decades of mastery. The young fighter's confidence wavered. He had prepared for rage. He had not prepared for discipline. Tyson's silence was deafening. Every eye in the crowd watched him, trying to read his thoughts, to predict his next move. Yet there was no trace of anger, no hint of desperation. Only control. The young fighter lunged again, reckless and wild, hoping to force a reaction. But Tyson met the lunge not with force, but with anticipation. With a single motion, he intercepted the young fighter's arms, guiding him gently but firmly off balance. The crowd gasped. Cameras captured every second. "You see," Tyson said quietly, finally breaking the silence, "strength isn't always about hitting first." His voice carried over the murmurs, calm but commanding. "It's about knowing when to move, when to wait, and when to teach." The young fighter froze, caught mid-motion. Humiliation flashed across his face, replaced by confusion. The audience, too, struggled to process what was unfolding. This wasn't a knockout. This wasn't the fight they had expected. It was something far more powerful, a display of wisdom and mastery. Tyson released the young fighter, stepping back, giving him space to regain composure. "You're fast, you're strong, but you're impatient," Tyson continued, his gaze steady. "A real fighter understands himself before challenging another." The young fighter tried to recover, throwing a few light punches, but each one was met with effortless deflection. Tyson moved like a shadow, fluid, uncatchable. Every dodge and block was a statement. Experience trumps aggression, patience outweighs brashness. The crowd leaned forward, captivated. Some were cheering in admiration, others whispering disbelief. At one point, the young fighter lunged recklessly, his anger bubbling over. He aimed to land a hit, a point to save face in front of the world. Tyson caught his wrists mid-lunge, holding him firmly against his chest. The young fighter struggled, expecting pain, expecting retaliation. But none came. Tyson's grip was secure but gentle, controlled yet unyielding. "You don't fight the legend by proving how fast you can swing," Tyson said softly. "You fight the legend by learning to respect the ring, respect yourself." The words echoed through the quieted crowd. The young fighter's arrogance began to crumble. Sweat glistened on his brow, and his chest heaved with exertion. Not from fear of being hit, but from the realization that he had misjudged the man in front of him. Tyson's presence alone commanded respect, more than any punch ever could. For several tense moments, the young fighter simply hung there, guided by Tyson's firm hands, a silent lesson being delivered without a single strike. Then Tyson stepped back, releasing him entirely. The young fighter stumbled slightly, catching himself, and looked up. The eyes that met his were no longer those of a feared opponent or a raging champion. They were those of a teacher, a master, a man who had transcended the need to fight out of ego. The crowd erupted, not in the violent cheer they had anticipated, but in stunned admiration. Cameras flashed furiously, capturing a new narrative. Mike Tyson, the man who once let rage define him, now defining his legacy through control, poise, and wisdom. Social media would explode with clips tonight. The world would be talking for days. But Tyson didn't care. This wasn't about proving he was still the strongest. It was about proving that strength could exist without destruction. The young fighter, finally catching his breath, nodded slightly, a gesture of humility and acknowledgement. He had come seeking a spectacle, a victory in front of thousands. What he had received instead was a lesson he would not forget. Tyson's silence had spoken louder than any punch. As the crowd dispersed, Tyson remained in the ring for a moment, letting the energy of the event settle around him. He touched the ropes, feeling the worn leather beneath his fingers, and allowed a small, knowing smile. The day had been a test, not of his body, but of his spirit, and he had passed with the quiet dignity of a true champion. Outside, the city lights reflected off the glass buildings, bright and artificial, yet somehow softened by the quiet of the evening. Tyson walked away from the ring, each step measured, every breath controlled. Somewhere, a crowd was still buzzing with disbelief, replaying the events, debating what they had witnessed. But Tyson didn't need their applause or approval. He had faced the challenge on his own terms. He had proven something far greater than skill, mastery over oneself. As he disappeared into the night, the young fighter lingered for a moment in the now empty square, staring at the space where Tyson had been. Something had shifted inside him, a mixture of awe, respect, and humility. For the first time, he understood that fighting wasn't always about victory over another. Sometimes it was about victory over oneself, and the courage to hold back when the world demanded release. Tyson had arrived a fighter, but he left as a teacher. And the city, unknowingly, had witnessed a rare lesson in true strength. The city woke the next morning buzzing with the aftermath of the spectacle. Clips of the previous night's events flooded every screen: social media feeds, news networks, and sports channels. Headlines shouted, asterisk, Tyson silences the young challenger without a punch. Asterisk and asterisk, the beast shows a new kind of power. Asterisk, the narrative had shifted overnight. People weren't talking about who had won a fight. They were talking about what had been taught. Tyson remained in the quiet of his gym, the morning sun spilling across the worn floors, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He moved slowly through his routine, stretching, shadowboxing, and listening to the rhythm of his own breath. The city outside was alive, but inside, everything was calm. He had delivered his message. Strength tempered by wisdom always commands more respect than uncontrolled rage. A knock at the door broke his focus. It was the young fighter from the night before, cautiously entering. His face was different now, not cocky, not brash, but thoughtful, even humbled. Tyson looked up and gave a small nod. "You came back," Tyson said quietly. "I had to," the young fighter replied. I needed to understand. Last night, I didn't get what was happening at first. I thought it was just a stunt. But now, I get it. I saw what you were showing me. You didn't fight to win, you fought to teach." Tyson studied him for a long moment. He saw the spark that had driven this young man, the same hunger he had once possessed. But unlike him, the youth had not yet learned the subtle truth that real strength required more than aggression. Tyson's eyes softened, and he motioned for him to sit. "You have talent," Tyson said. "Raw, powerful, and fast. But talent without control is dangerous. You think a punch proves who you are, but it doesn't. Discipline proves who you are. Patience proves who you are. And respect proves the most." The young fighter leaned back, absorbing the words, feeling their weight. He had sought validation in the roar of the crowd, in the fear he could inspire. Now he realized there was a different kind of validation, one that came from mastery of oneself rather than mastery over others. Tyson rose, moving to the ring once more. He stood inside it silently, letting the young fighter take in the scene. "This ring," Tyson said, voice calm but resonant, "has seen anger, triumph, pain, and glory. But more than that, it has seen choices. Every fighter here, every champion, learns that sometimes the hardest fight isn't with another person. It's with the self inside you, the part that wants to lash out, to prove, to dominate. Conquering that is the real victory." The young fighter nodded slowly, eyes wide with understanding. I see now. The fight wasn't yours last night, it was mine. And I lost in a way I needed to." Tyson smiled faintly. "Not lost. Learned. Remember that. Every fight teaches you something. And some fights teach you more outside the ring than inside it." There was a long pause, a moment where the gym seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the quiet revolution that had occurred in this small space. Tyson's words hung in the air, heavy with significance. The young fighter stood and offered his hand. Tyson took it firmly, not as a gesture of competition, but of connection. "You've got potential," Tyson said. "Use it wisely. And remember, the world will try to make you fight their way, but you don't have to. Choose your battles carefully." The young fighter left, walking out into the morning light changed. He wasn't just physically tired, he was mentally transformed. The arrogance that had once defined him had been replaced by a newfound respect for discipline, patience, and the wisdom of experience. Tyson watched him go, then returned to the center of the gym. He removed his gloves and stared at his reflection in the mirror. There were lines in his face that hadn't been there before, shadows of battles, both physical and internal. But there was also serenity. He had faced the challenge, not with fists but with wisdom. And that, he realized, was the kind of victory that lasts. Later that evening, Tyson walked through the quiet streets. The city's neon lights glimmered, reflecting in puddles from a recent rain. Cars honked in the distance, voices carried from open windows, and somewhere a dog barked. Yet Tyson's mind was calm, centered, aware of the simple beauty of movement, choice, and consequence. He had confronted challenge without surrendering to rage. He had shown strength without violence. He paused on a small bridge, looking at the water below. Ripples formed and faded, much like the fleeting expectations of the world. Tyson thought about legacy, his own, and what he wanted to leave behind. Fame, money, titles, they were meaningless compared to the lesson he had shared. True power came from restraint, control, and the courage to act with intention rather than impulse. A notification beeped on his phone. Messages, headlines, clips from the previous night flooding social media. People were calling it a defining moment, a turning point. Some celebrated the restraint, some were baffled. Tyson didn't care about the opinions. What mattered was that he had faced the challenge as himself, unfiltered and authentic. He smiled faintly, recalling the young fighter's face, a mixture of awe, humility, and newfound understanding. In that moment, Tyson realized the most significant victories were invisible. Moments that no camera fully captured, lessons that no applause could measure. As he walked into the sunrise, the city stretching endlessly before him, the camera could almost see the echo of his presence in every shadowed corner of the streets and in the hearts of those who had watched. He had proven that power doesn't always roar, it sometimes whispers. That silence, when wielded with conviction, can speak louder than any punch ever thrown. Tyson disappeared into the morning light, leaving behind a story not of anger, but of mastery, not of destruction, but of teaching. And somewhere, out in the world, someone would remember that night, not for a fight that was won or lost, but for a lesson in the kind of strength that truly endures. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful journeys that inspire, challenge, and uplift. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of hope and strength. Join our community. Your support means everything.